Good morning and happy Sabbath to all of you. As you open your Bibles in Luke chapter 17, the story that is there from verse 11 through 19 is a story that has been read many times and touched upon many times. But as we read in verse 11, it says there, "And it came to pass that he went to Jerusalem, that he passed through the midst of Samaria and Galilee. And as he entered into a certain village, there met him 10 men that were lepers, which stood afar off." I will stop there for a moment. There he was, Jesus was coming, and he crossed Samaria and Galilee. I don't know if you have seen the maps, but it's quite far away from Jerusalem. And as he was walking and he entered into this village, 10 lepers came, which stood afar off. What is leprosy? According to what I found, is of all the diseases known in the East, leprosy was most dreaded. It's incurable and contagious in character, and its horrible effects on its victims filled the bravest with fear. Among the Jews, it was regarded as the judgment on account of sin, and hence was called the finger of God, and it was looked upon as a symbol of sin. Like one already dead, the leper was shut out from the habitations of men. Whatever he touched was unclean. The air was polluted by his breath. One suspected of having the disease must present himself to the priest. If pronounced a leper, he was doomed to associate only with those similarly afflicted. The law was inflexible. Kings and rulers were not an exempt. They were away from friends and kindreds. The lepers must bear the curse. He was obliged to publish his calamity and sound the alarm warning, all to flee his contaminating presence. The cry, "Unclean, unclean," coming in mournful tones from the lonely exile, was a signal heard with fear and abhorrence. Such is this disease called leprosy. I thought about doing a PowerPoint, but after I saw the pictures, I said, better not. Better not. It's not the best. It doesn't look good. But in the Bible, before we expound on this story here, there are several things that the Bible speaks about in regards to leprosy. In Leviticus chapter 13, verses 46 through 52, there is a direct command of the Lord what needed to be done when somebody was found with this disease. Leviticus 13, I'm going to read 46 and 52. And if you want to read later, you can read the entire chapter. It tells you about everything that it needed to be done when there was leprosy found. 46 through 52 says, "All the days wherein the plague shall be in him, he shall be defiled. He is unclean. He shall dwell alone. Without the camp shall his habitation be. The garment also that the plague of leprosy is in, whether it be a woolen garment or a linen garment, whether it be in warp or woof, of linen or a woolen, whether in a skin or in anything made of skin. And if the plague be greenish or reddish in the garment or in the skin, either in the warp or in the woof or in anything of skin, it is a plague of leprosy, and shall be shown unto the priest. And the priest shall look upon the plague, and shut up it, and had the plague 7 days. And he shall look on the plague on the 7th day, and the plague be spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof or in the skin, or in any work that is made of skin. The plague is a fretting leprosy, it is unclean. He shall therefore burn that garment, whether warp or woof, or woolen or linen, or anything of skin, wherein the plague is, for it is a fretting leprosy, it shall be burnt in the fire. This is just to mention to you a few of the things. When they will find these things, this is what they were supposed to do. And it was done by a priest. He needed to look at it. And if after 7 days were passed and this continued, it was leprosy and it was declared unclean. Clothes, anything that had it had to be burned. Nothing could be left there, just lingering. There are a few examples also in the Bible about those that got leprosy. Who remembers one? Very famous. Naaman, yes, but there is even one before all of this. Miriam, I heard, yes, Miriam. Why did leprosy come to Miriam? You remember? The story is found in Numbers 12, 8 through 15. Basically, she was upset at Moses, and then she conspired with his brother, and they went to complain. And then God chastised her. Actually, God chastised both. But Aaron repented. And Miriam still had that issue because she was the instigator. Then she became white because of the leprosy. And then Moses asked God to forgive her, to cleanse her. And God did, but she needed to be out of the camp for 7 days. So she needed to learn her lesson. There is one kind of leprosy in Leviticus chapter 14, verses 33 to 57, and we're not going to read all the verses, but we're going to read a few. Leviticus 14, 33 to 57. When ye be come into the land of Canaan, which I give to you for a possession, and I put the plague of leprosy in a house of the land of your possession, and he that owneth the house shall come and tell the priest, saying, It seemeth to me there is, as it were, a plague in the house, then the priest shall command that they empty the house, before the priest go into it to see the plague, that all that is in the house be not made unclean. And afterward the priest shall go in to see the house. And he shall look on the plague, and behold, if the plague be in the walls of the house, with hollow streaks, greenish or reddish, which inside are lower than the wall, then the priest shall go out of the house to the door of the house, and shut up the house 7 days. So even houses can have what? Leprosy. Now, we don't call it leprosy today. What do we call it? Mold. How many of you are affected by mold when you enter into a place that there is mold? At least I am. And I start sneezing like nobody's business. I mean, it won't stop until I get out of there. It's very strong. But then you see here, God was telling them, and this is a disease that it can get to you. One brother that passed away about a month ago, I was told that the reason why he got cancer was because he was a builder. Brother Baker, Freeman Baker, was a builder. He went under a crawl space, and there was full of mold. And he was not using a mask when he went in. So he actually inhaled these things, and he got cancer, and it was here on his throat, to the point that they had to open here so he could breathe and talk. And eventually, her brother died after 7-8 years of fighting the disease. So it is very dangerous. We have to be very careful. If we have it in our homes, we need to clean it or to ask somebody to do it, because it can be deadly. Yeah. Unfortunately, our brother died out of that. Interesting, in 2 Chronicles chapter 26, 2 Chronicles 26. There is an example of a king. King Uzziah. 2 Chronicles 26, verses 19 through 21. Then Uzziah was wroth and had a censer in his hand to burn incense. And while he was wroth with the priest, the leprosy even rose up in his forehead before the priest in the house of the Lord from beside the incense altar. And Azariah the chief priest and all the priests looked upon him, and behold, he was leprous in his forehead. And they thrust him out from thence. Yea, himself haste also to go out, because the Lord had smitten him. And Uzziah the king was a leper unto the days of his death, and dwelt in a several house, being a leper. For he was cut off from the house of the Lord. And Jotham, his son, was over the king's house, judging the people of the land. And if we go to verse 23, it says, So Uzziah slept with his fathers, and they buried him with his fathers in the field of burial which belonged to the kings. For they said, He is a leper, and Jotham his son reigned in his stead. So this king here did something very terrible that he was not supposed to do. He went inside the temple. He tried to bring incense to the Lord, and the situation developed to such extent that God had to intervene. Even the priests were telling him not to do it, and he went ahead and did it, and then in his forehead there was leprosy that came out, and I'm sure the priests were shocked because it just happened just like this. Very interesting, in the year 1931, 2 tables were found by a professor of the University of Hebrew in Jerusalem. His name is E.L. Sakenek, and he found the Uzziah's tablets, and in one of them said, the inscription on the tablet is translated, Hither were brought the bones of Uzziah, king of Judah, do not open. Because he died of leprosy. So the tablet said, please do not open this. So it was so dreaded that they had to write something like that so nobody would be contaminated. The other example found in the Bible is Naaman, as it was mentioned. He was a Samaritan. He was looking for healing. He had to dip 7 times in the Jordan River, and we know the story. Now, there is another story that is very interesting. 2 Kings chapter 7. 2 Kings 7. You know, usually those that suffer leprosy, they have to be out of the cities, far away. They needed to dress in black. They needed, when they saw people, they needed to cry, unclean, unclean, leprosy, leprosy. And they were shunned by everybody. You know, people didn't like to see them at all. They dread so much this disease. But in 2 Kings 7, 3, 8 through 10, there was a very interesting thing that happened. There was an army has besieged Samaria. And as they were there, the Lord sent a noise, and this host that was there, the Syrians, they all fled, leaving the camp empty. And what happened? Verse 8, and when these lepers came to the outermost part of the camp, they went into one tent and did eat and drink, and carried thence silver and gold and raiment, and went and hid it, and came again and entered into another tent, and carried thence also, and went and hid it. But verse 9 says, then they said one to another, we do not well. This day is a day of good tidings, and we hold our peace. If we tarry till the morning light, some mischief will come upon us. Now therefore come, that we may go and tell the king's household. Verse 10 says, So they came and called unto the porter of the city, and they told them, saying, We came to the camp of the Syrians, and behold, there was no man there, neither voice of men, but horses tied and asses tied, and the tents as they were. There it was, 4 lepers, full of the disease, people that were not cared of. What did they decide to do once they had the whole camp right to themselves? There was the food was there, gold, silver. What did they decide to do? They said, we're not doing well. Let's go to the city. How long had been the city besieged? For a long time. And there was not even food. And they went and knocked, and they told the people. You see how different the attitude? If the people inside, even though they were hungry, and they saw the lepers coming, what do you think they would have done? Run away and hide themselves. And yet these men that have seen all this food went and said, we're not doing well. Let's go and let them know. What a difference. It's really very, very different than the attitude of those that are healed. How many of you have had chicken pox? How do you look? Terrible, right? It's awful. I remember my brother, who was older than me, he got it first. And he developed some big balls like this. And I looked and I was like, I don't want to get it. Well, it's too late. I got it, and I got it all over my body, and that itches. And of course, people don't want to see some, because you can really get it. It transmits very fast, very fast. And I remember one time, several friends of us, we were living in one house, and somebody had come to visit, and that person had, I don't know, we don't know where she got this chicken pox. And they said, well, he needs to eat. And I said, sure, he needs to eat, but none wanted to take the food to him. And so I remember that once you have it once, the likelihood that you will get it again is very slim. So I said, I had it before. I will be the one, going between him and the rest of you. So I won't, you don't have to expose yourself. Thankfully, I didn't get it again, because I understand now that you can get it again if you expose yourself, especially if you already had the virus in your body. So I'm thankful that I did not get it. But there's another example. In Luke chapter 5, verse 12, Jesus cured another man, another leper. From the time of Naaman, and also from the time of the 4 lepers, there was none cure of leprosy according to the Bible until the time when Jesus comes in Luke chapter 5, verse 12. And the same story is repeated in Matthew. The man came and he asked Jesus to cure him, and Jesus touched him. Actually, he touched him. None of the disciples, anyone, dared to touch a leper. Why? Because he was contagious. But Jesus did. He went and he touched the man. It's very hard when something like that happens. When you become untouchable, and I am talking about in the matter of disease, according to the definition, is not able or allowing to be touched or affected. Can you imagine you having some type of disease that you cannot have no relationship with nobody, neither friends nor family, how would you feel? You know, I did a little bit of a chaplaincy at the Baptist Hospital in Charlotte. And one time they gave me a list. And they said, we want you to go and visit these people and talk to them. But there was one that was marked with highlighted. He said, this one specifically, we want you to go and talk to him. Okay? He only speaks Spanish. I said, okay, no problem. But when you get there, you have to follow everything that is said on the door. They didn't tell me what it was. So I go, I went and I visited the other ones. He was the last one. So when I get to the door, I see hazardous, you have to put these gloves, you have to put this gown, you have to put this mask, and you have to put this thing. I was thinking, what is going on here? So it was something contagious. But if you cover yourself, at least that's what they told me afterwards, you are safe. But, that's the only way that you can approach somebody today in a hospital. Yeah? But at that time, in the time of leprosy, and even when Jesus was around, there was none of this. You remember what I read? Even the breath of the person was bad to breathe. So they needed to be very careful. But what was going on during these times? Let us go back to Luke chapter 17. Now notice what's happening here. Okay, Jesus was passing through Samaria and Galilee. When he entered into a village, 10 men that were lepers which stood afar off. According to the law given in Leviticus 13, this was correct. The lepers needed to stay afar off from anyone that was clean. Okay, within quotes. And then verse 13 says, and they lift up their voices and say, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. They were afar off. Okay? There were 10. Now, when 10 people raise their voice, do you think that they can be heard? Sure they can. What was their main desire? To be what? To be healed. Now, how have these men heard about Christ? Has he cured any other diseases? Sure he had, right? Was this their only hope? Yes, it was. And they understood who he was. I'm sure that Jesus was walking with the 12, and then they counted, there's 13, so this must be Jesus, right? But they knew who he was. He said, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us. And when he saw them, he said unto them, go show yourself unto the priest. Okay? That was the answer that Jesus gave. This is the first thing that is very interesting that Jesus said. He tells them to go and show themselves to the priest. Were they cured at this very moment? No, that's correct. They were not. Notice what it says the rest of the verse. And it came to pass that as they went, they were cleansed. So it was not when Jesus said, go and show yourself to the priest, that the miracle happened. No. It was when they began going. They were cleansed. When they heard the words and they believed, then the thing happened. And as they began going. Trust was required at this moment from these men. They obeyed Christ's word, and then the miracle followed. You know, in this case, faith here was actuated by the walk they did. Now, if you have a disease, okay, and they tell you the medicine is in such and such a place, and that is the only way, the only place that you can get that medicine, what would you do? Would you walk? Would you run? Would you drive? Yes. Would you take a motorcycle, which is a little faster? Yeah. What would you do? You will try to get there as fast as possible, right? So can you imagine? Now think about it. Where were they? Somewhere between Samaria and Galilee. How far was it from there to Jerusalem? It was quite far. I can tell you that much. It was very far. But they knew that if they trust and believe in Jesus' words, the matter was going to happen. And I'm sure that they just did not turn around and started walking and started talking among themselves. Did you believe what he said? No. I believe that they began running. That was their opportunity. They could find healing. Now, something else happened. Through their obedience, the lepers were healed, and 9 of them started running towards Jerusalem. Leviticus 14, 1 through 5, and verse 32, it tells us that that was correct. What Jesus said, go show yourself unto the priest, it was correct. Once the person was declared a leper, the same priest needed to check when they were healed to declare them clean. So that was correct. It shows 2 things. One, they trust in the word of Christ. And second, Jesus himself approved the fact that they needed to go to the priest because the law says so. So he was abiding by the same laws that he had given in the Old Testament. He was not trying to go around because he had the power to do so. No, but he still say, go show yourself unto the priest. But now we have 9 going in one direction. But we have 1 doing the opposite. Notice verse 15 says, and one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back and with a loud voice glorified God. Why did he return to Christ? Could he, this one leper, could he go to show himself to the priest in Jerusalem? What do you think? No, he couldn't. Why? There were 9 that were Jewish, and 1 was a Samaritan. He couldn't go. Interesting, brethren. What was one of the things that happened to those that will be infected by leprosy? They were shunned. They were put aside. They couldn't live close to the city or anything like that. But once they were restored, what will happen to them? Will they continue living outside the city? No. They will go back to their families, to their friends. They could go to the temple. They have all the privileges that anyone that was well could have. But 1 didn't have that. And instead of running towards Jerusalem with the other 10 that were his friends, what happened? He went the other way. The Jewish lepers saw greatest value in the healing, but not in the healer. But the Samaritan saw the greatest value in the healer, not in the healing. That's the difference. Yet, even though they were following what the law said, they needed to go and present themselves to the priest. But you know what? The Samaritan chose the best. Who is Jesus? Who is Jesus today? He is our high priest. There is a lesson here, brethren. You know, in that interesting, painful, hopeless environment, the 9 Jews and the Samaritans are fighting for their life together. At that time, with leprosy, they were brothers. It seems like they were going everywhere, in the 10 of them. No problem. They were brothers. There was 9 Jews, 1 Samaritan. And the prejudice that existed between them was broken down by this terrible malady and doomed to death. They associated together. You know, I think the saying, misery loves company, applies here. They were in misery. And because the end result was the same, they didn't care. All that wall was gone. And they could be together. They were brothers. But once the healing came, what happened? The wall went up again. The Samaritan lost his brothers. He was now healed. But to the Jews, he was still a dog. That's what they were considered, like dogs. Now he was healed. He was no longer a brother. He was a dog. They didn't even turn around and see why he wasn't there. They didn't care about celebrating with him. But now they could go and celebrate with their families, with their friends. But the Samaritan, different. But it says here, and one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, and with a loud voice, glorified God. Who had the best? The Samaritan, yes. And so much was the joy that this man had. And Jesus probably wasn't that far from where he was, but he still needed to go to where he was. Verse 16 says, and fell down on his face at his feet, giving him thanks, and he was a Samaritan. How do you think Jesus felt at that moment? Was he happy? Was he half happy? Was he upset? I believe that it broke Jesus' heart. That those, or the nation that he was blessing, rejected him. You know, this situation here is exactly what happened throughout his whole ministry. Who were the ones that accepted Jesus the most? The outcast, the untouchable. But those that were supposed to be waiting for the Messiah and teaching the people that Jesus could be there were the ones that were rejecting him. They didn't understand what was going on. You know, this verse 16 is full of significance for us. When he fell down on his face at his feet, what do you think he was doing? Worshiping him, yes. But also saying what? Here am I. He put himself at his disposal to do a work that none else could do. Can you imagine when this man went back to his town? Alone. But he went back to his town, to his family. There was no priest. Yeah, he had been with the priest, with the high priest, that had given him not only healing of body, but also healing of the soul. And he could do a work that none else could do. Not at that time anyway. And then it says here that he gave him thanks. And he was a Samaritan. Did the other 9 thank Christ for what he did? No. He doesn't say. But they run to Jerusalem. I'm sure they were leaping of joy, jumping, and I don't know, they could have found horses to get even faster to where they were supposed to be going to. But yet their mind was not in the one that healed them, but that they were healed. But what about us? What is our situation? What is our condition? You know, leprosy was considered not only a dreadful disease, but it was compared to sin. Sin is dreadful. Doesn't Isaiah says that we are all sick from the bottom of our feet to the top of our head? Yes, it does. And such is our condition, but we don't see it because it is a spiritual condition. It's not a physical thing. But yet, many times it translates into actions of ourselves. But let us not fear. You know, we still have time. Let us not be ungrateful. Let us not be unthankful. In Ministry of Healing, in page 233 says, when the 10 lepers were cleansed, only one returned to find Jesus and give him glory. Let none of us be like the unthinking 9, whose hearts were untouched by the mercy of God. Let us not be like them. Let's think, brethren. God is willing to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Is that the promise, right? We have a high priest. We have a priest that we can go. We can run to him. Notice what the words of Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15 and 16 are. Hebrews 4, 15 and 16. Seeing then that we have a great high priest that is passed into the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our profession. For we have not an high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. It's open. The invitation is open. You know, I find very strong this word. Let us therefore come boldly. It's a very strong word. And I compare my bilingual Bible. And in Spanish, it's a little bit different. It says, let us therefore come with confidence. Did the lepers came with confidence to Jesus? Yes, they did. They have the confidence that Christ, the healer, the master healer, the master physician, could do the very work that they desired to do. But every one of them had a choice to make. And they all make that choice. The 10 were healed. Even if they were going in different direction, they were healed. But only one actually was thankful for what it was done. Brethren, let us not forget that when we are in a difficulty and we pray and we see God's answers to our prayers, whatever that may be, let us be ready to thank him. Because there's nothing in us that can bring any good thing. Every good thing comes from where? From above. Yes, this man found Jesus, found the Messiah. He was an outcast. and untouchable. But yet, he was able to come to the foot of Christ, worship him and to touch him and to thank him. Let us remember that we all have that opportunity. We all need healing in a spiritual sense, and we all can find it if we are willing. The choice is ours. What are we going to choose to do? Amen.